Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Sinner's Sacrifice for Redemption on the PC. Now, this is a title that was sent to me by another indie so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, I've played this title last year at Gamescom, naturally, an alpha version of it, and I even got to interview the game director, so I know a thing or two about the design philosophy behind this title, what the whole point of the whole thing is. And now I finally got to play what I assume is the final version, and I say assume because the game's coming out on the 25th of April when I already have access to the full thing. However, not everything is good news, and I do have a lot of criticism to make onto this title. But before we get to the criticism part, I want to tell you guys what this title is all about. So this is very much a boss fight game. So essentially you're going to be fighting bosses, and that's going to be most of the gameplay. There's not really going to be levels, or at least that's what they told me at the time, because to be honest, I haven't really played enough of the game to finish it, and I'm not sure if I'm going to. But the whole point of it is the boss fights. You're going to engage in these boss fights, and in order to participate in the boss fights, you're going to have to sacrifice something. That's the whole theme of the game. So for instance, the very first boss that you guys will be seeing in this video, in order to fight him, I have to sacrifice a percentage of both my health pool as well as my stamina gauge. That is why you guys are going to see that my health pool and stamina gauge are a little bit more limited than what it seems is the maximum of the gauge itself. That was the sacrifice that I had to do that enabled me to actually fight this particular boss. And that's kind of like the whole mechanic behind the game. So the more you play the game, the harder it's going to get, because you're going to have to constantly sacrifice more and more. These aren't temporary sacrifices. So you sacrifice the health and stamina in order to fight this boss. That is the health and stamina that you are going to be taking to the next boss fight. And that's kind of like the whole theme of the game, which is why it's called Sinner's Sacrifice for Redemption, because you're constantly sacrificing different things. Now, the two bosses that I've fought so far were this crow-looking dude and another boss that looks like a lady in an armored suit. And for the lady in an armored suit, I had to sacrifice some of my supplies. So I lose like half of the spears that I can throw, I lose half of my grenades, and I lose the ability to enchant my weapon with fire. And naturally, this stuff keeps stacking. The game keeps getting harder and harder. That was the whole design philosophy behind the game, according to what the game director told me. So I was a little bit confused when I killed the first boss, and it's like, well, you sacrificed this, but now we're going to increase your health because you killed this boss. And I don't know, that felt a little bit confusing, because I thought the whole thing was going to be you start at your strongest, and then you just start getting weaker as you go throughout the game. But anyway, let's get started by taking a look at the visuals. Now, visually, I actually thought the game was pretty good. I thought the minimalistic visuals actually help you when you are going through the boss fights, because you can identify what's important and what's not important. And I also dig the art style. It's minimalistic, it's simplistic, but it gets the job done, and it runs really well. At least it ran really well on my PC, which is running a GTX 970, which is by today's standards a pretty weak GPU. And the game was just still running fine. And again, it's not the most graphically intensive or demanding game. But again, I like the simplicity sometimes on certain art styles. And on this game, I actually dig what they're going for. And I think it looked pretty good. From your character to the enemies that you fight. If there's one thing that I would like to see improved a little bit in the visuals, is some of the animations. Particularly for the Raven boss, I thought sometimes his animations were just a little bit out of whack. But, you know, that's something I can deal with. Again, we have to remember this is an indie team. This is a very small studio off of China. So it's not like they have the same budget as a big studio like a Ubisoft or something like that. They're on a much more limited budget here. So let's keep that in mind. The other thing is the sound. Now, when it comes to the sound, there's just no other way to put it. I didn't like the sound. I thought the sound took me out of the experience a lot of times, because there's just a lot of sounds that they just sound kind of goofy and not even in a good way. There's a couple of clanks here and there that kind of work with the sword, but then, you know, from the sound of you hitting the enemy just being like this, and sometimes the crow going like wah wah, and just like the sound of the feathers hitting you, I don't know, I just didn't care for a lot of the sounds in the game, and I thought that was probably, in terms of like sound and visual presentation, the sound is not nearly as good quality as the visuals, at least in my personal opinion. But now let's get on to the gameplay. So what is the gameplay like? Just to kind of tell you guys the whole thing. You're going to be starting, you're going to select the boss that you're going to be fighting. Once you select that boss, you're going to make the sacrifice, whether that is your health bar, your stamina gauge, or the supplies, or whatever other things you might lose. I think eventually you're also going to lose attack damage in order to fight certain bosses, and you're going to be constantly losing stuff, basically. So you make that sacrifice, and then you go in and you start fighting the boss. Now, they give you 2 weapons that you can choose from. One of those weapons is a combination of sword and shield. The other one is a 2-handed sword. Naturally, the 2-handed sword will deal more damage than the sword and shield is a little bit faster than the 2-handed sword. You can also do charged attacks by holding down triangle or the Y button if you're using an Xbox controller. Those charged attacks, I don't think they're particularly effective when it comes to sword and shield. However, they are definitely more effective when you have the 2-handed sword, because it's going to do a wind-up attack that's going to do 2 hits, and that is a really, really powerful attack. Then you have also these enchantments that you can put on the swords, and those enchantments are going to have your swords deal fire damage. However, there's a drawback to them as well. There's always this mechanic of risk and reward for the things that you are doing, right? And the drawback is that your health is going to start slowly ticking down, because essentially your sword's on fire, so you're taking damage because your sword is too hard to actually, it's too hot to actually hold. Then there's a couple of more items that you can use. There's the potions. I think you get around 7 potions per fight. I think you might eventually lose some of those potions because you'll have to sacrifice them in certain bosses. You get 20 spears that you can throw that kind of work like lightning spears. They seem to do a little bit of an AoE effect once they hit their target. And a couple of fire bombs that you can throw against your enemies as well. So you use all of these tools in the fight and, you know, get to it, kill the boss. Now, the camera is actually always locked onto the boss, even though you have to manually hit the lock-on button if you want to throw stuff at him, so that it actually locks onto him. But the camera itself is always going to be angling towards the boss. Now, this is going to be a little bit tough on certain situations. Particularly the first boss that I fought clearly illustrated one of the situations, which is he goes, at some point he teleports into the middle of the arena and he starts doing an AoE spell, and it's like, well, I can't turn the camera, I need to run away, but the camera is just constantly looking at the boss, so I don't know which direction is actually safe to run away, particularly because this takes place in an arena that is just surrounded by a cliff. So if you run too far away, you're going to fall into the cliff. But then again, if you stay too close, you're going to get poisoned. And the poison, good God, there's no item to get you rid of poison. And that poison seems to be enough to, like, kill you twice. Okay? Once you get poisoned, you're going to basically be killed twice. So you have to constantly heal. And this is not the kind of poison that's going to take you down to 1 health pool and let you live. No, it's like this is the kind of poison that will kill you if it runs through its course. So you have to constantly spam heal if you get poisoned. As a matter of fact, if you get poisoned in that particular fight, in my opinion, just kill yourself and start over. Don't even try going for the fight if you've been poisoned. But, you know, that's just one man's opinion. But, yeah, the whole camera thing, I struggled a little bit with it in the fight. But, you know, once you get used to it, once you know the arena a little bit better, it's not as problematic, because you're going to learn, okay, so I can run this way to avoid the big AoE poison attack that the boss is going to do at that point in time. So you just kind of run there, you avoid the AoE, and then you get back into the fight. Now, another problem that I had with the game is that I felt certain attacks were not very well telegraphed, and certain special mechanics are not explained to the player at all. This was something that I actually noticed back in Gamescom, because I fought this boss in Gamescom, and I came pretty close to killing him, and then I died because one of the mechanics was not very well explained at the time. And I was actually asking, because like I said, I got to speak with the game director, and I was like, so what happened to me during that boss fight? Why did I die? And this is a section in this boss where he basically summons 4 smaller clones of himself, but the clones don't seem menacing at all. So I just decided to ignore them. And the reason they don't seem menacing is because they just kind of sit there and not really do anything. They don't try to attack you. They just seem to be sitting there chanting an incantation. And another different poison gauge is going to appear on screen at that time. And if you're not paying too much attention, you know, if that poison, the secondary poison gauge will kill you. Basically, if that poison gauge fills up, you're going to die. It's like this purple skull gauge that shows up. And basically, you have to kill the 4 clone dudes because they're the ones who are doing the special incantation, but there's nothing, there's no message, there's no indication, there's virtually no guidance whatsoever that tells you, you know, you should focus some attacks on these 4 dudes that are here, otherwise you're gonna die. So this time I killed the boss because I remembered what the guy told me, like, oh yeah, you gotta kill those 4 dudes. So when they showed up, I instantly killed them and I was able to finish off the boss. But you know, newer players are gonna die to that mechanic and they're gonna be like, why did I die? I don't understand, you know? That's just gonna be a thing. And that's one of the biggest problems that I have with the game is not only some of the attacks need to be better telegraphed, like you need to be able to react better to these attacks, but also you need to balance these encounters a little bit more. Now look, I'm not asking for the game to be easier. I'm asking for the game to be a little bit more fun because the stamina gauge that your character has is incredibly limiting. It is like to the point where you do like 2 or 3 dodges, you're done. You have to wait until your stamina gets back on track. And considering the onslaught that just the 2 bosses that I fought so far were able to inflict on me, I'm just like, whoa, this is insane. And now I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are like, well, Rurikhan, isn't this the beginning of the game? Like, you're going to be leveling up, you're going to get more stamina. It's like, no, that's the whole point. At least from what the game director told me back at Gamescom, it's like, you're going to start at your strongest. And the more you play the game, the more bosses you defeat, your character is actually going to become weaker. At least that is my understanding of the gameplay mechanics. And it's like, if you're telling me that at my strongest, my character can barely do 3 dodge rolls and counterattack, like what? How am I gonna fight, particularly when the bosses have almost like no telegraphs, which means you're gonna be stuck in a lot of situations multiple times where you're gonna be spamming dodge because since the attacks are not properly telegraphed, you're not gonna know whether or not it is safe to be close to the boss. Hell, you're not gonna know whether or not it is safe to be far away from the boss. And the other boss that I fought with the lady in the armored suit, there was one time where one of the versions of the lady, because this is a boss that switches phases and whatnot. One of those phases, one of them just like killed me with random lightning falling from the ceiling. There wasn't even anything I could do. I went from like full health to nothing, and like I was trying to dodge. So even whilst dodging, I got hit by lightning and I died. And I was just like, I mean, how am I supposed to handle that? I'm spamming dodge. I'm not close to the boss. There was just nothing I could have done because RNGesus hit me with every single lightning that boss happened to cast. So that's the problem to me, is in the balance and the fun factor, right? Because I mean, it's not fun to be playing a character that is constantly running out of stamina. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, you got to be able to do some actions. You got to at least let me hit the boss a couple of times and still allow me to dodge, you know? Basically, if you do like a full-on charged attack, you might be able to get 1 dodge off after that. You can't even run away. That's the other thing. You can run, but like if you try to run, dude, running just will completely deplete your stamina in no time. Like again, I just felt the stamina gauge was way too small if you take into consideration that at the point that I was playing the game, this is when my character was going to be at its strongest. So to me, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, I feel like they should have done more polish. Like, I don't know how close the version of the game I have is to being finalized. I mean, I believe this is the full game that they've sent to me. And the game is going to be released on the 25th of April. But I think they still have a ton of polish to do on here. And you got to really give us better telegraphs. You got to give us better indications of when should we dodge? When should we do certain things? And I know some people might be saying, oh, look at Rurikhan becoming all casual. But it's like, I don't think that a game should be hard for the sake of being hard. I think a game should be hard for the sake of providing you with a reward, a sense of achievement when you actually kill a boss. And I can tell you right now, I killed that Raven boss. I didn't feel a sense of achievement. I felt a little bit of relief, like, hey, that one's done with, now on to the next. And it made it even worse when I came close to killing the second boss and failed, because I was like, oh my god, I have to start this fight all over again. And you see, that's the thing, because it's not a fun fight. You gotta give the players something that is considered fun, something that the players can experience a little bit of fun before you just throw challenge at them repeatedly and just kill them for the sake of killing them. I've always said that the thing that Dark Souls does really well, because let's face it, this game is heavily inspired by Dark Souls, and don't try to tell me, oh, Rurikhan, you're comparing everything to Dark Souls. No, I've spoken with the game director. This was heavily inspired by Dark Souls. As a matter of fact, one of the bosses, if you guys end up playing this game, you guys will see, it is a boss that is going to be very familiar if you've played the Souls games. But it's like, one of the things that the Souls genre does really well is that it provides you with a sense of challenge, and it gives you a very rewarding feeling of achievement at the end. Whereas in here, it's like, it's challenging, and you're losing your stats. Like, you basically sacrifice your stats in order to fight this boss, and then you kill this boss, and what do you get? Nothing. Everything just gets harder, and you go on to the next one, you know? So that to me is like, there needs to be something there that changes. I don't know what it's going to be. And in terms of the story, I was really confused because the game didn't launch in full screen. I had a couple of issues when I was starting to launch the game. And because of that, I wasn't able to watch the first cutscene. And the game did not provide me with an option to reset my save or anything like that. At this point, I think I would have had to completely delete the game and reinstall it. Or I don't know, in order to clear the save file or something, in order to be able to see the first cutscene. And those cutscenes, they go by so fast, I barely had enough time to actually read the text on the cutscenes. But there is a lore behind every one of the bosses that you fight. There's a story here. There's a reason as to why your character is the sinner and why he's atoning for everybody's sins. But I don't know what that reason is. Anyway, you guys, I'm sorry that it's a bit of a downer. Like, I really do hope they change some stuff for this game, because I was excited about it, and having played the final version, I think that technically from a visual standpoint, I think the game looks good, but I think that mechanically there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be made in order for at least me to actually enjoy the game and feel it rewarding and challenging in a good way. So, I don't know. Hopefully they make a couple of changes before the game releases on April 25th. Anyway, what do you guys thought about it? Let me know in the comment sections below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.